Welcome to another episode of Beyond the Test, where we talk about entertainment, life, and drug testing. Now here's your host, Elvis's #1 fan and cruise ship karaoke legend, past chairman and Hall of Fame inductee of the National Drug and Alcohol Screening Association, president of Accredited Drug Testing, Secure Screenings, and the Accredited Training Academy, Jim Greer.
All right, well, welcome to another episode of Beyond the Test, a podcast that talks about entertainment, life, and yes, drug testing. Today, I'm honored to have with us Patrice Kelly. She is going to be our guest today because she knows everything about DOT regulations. Some people say, Patrice, you're the expert's expert.
Thank you.
So we're going to talk about everything that we need to know about DOT drug testing, but we're going to find out a little bit about Patrice Kelly, how she got into the drug testing world. She also is the former director of the Office of Drug and Alcohol Policy Compliance of DOT. Most people call it ODAPC, but she is the person that knows all the answers about DOT regulations. We're going to talk a little bit about the rescheduling of marijuana and what's going to happen there. But first, I want to welcome you to the episode today, Patrice.
Thank you,
Great
Jim.
having you. Great having you.
Thanks. Great to be here.
So you're in warm Florida because you came from Washington, D.C.
Yes.
What was the temperature up there? Was it cold?
Oh, it was in the 40s, yeah, more or less. Our snow is finally melting away.
Is it melting? Because you guys
hit.
got a real blizzard, didn't you?
Yeah, we got hit pretty hard and a lot of ice.
Did it, did it stay? The snow was
For 6 weeks.
6 weeks.
I have lived in the D.C. area for 40 years, and I have never seen snow stay on the ground
Yeah, it was pretty
for
bad.
6 weeks.
Yeah. Well, so let me ask you, when you left, it was about 40 in the 40s,
Yes.
and now it's 76 degrees down here today. Are you
Yes.
enjoying Florida today while you're
I
here?
am.
Well, good.
I am. Thank
well,
you.
Good. Well, I'd like to know, Patrice, a little bit about, before we dive into drug testing and alcohol testing and everything DOT, tell me something about Patrice Kelly. You're an attorney, and you're married. I've met your wonderful husband a few times, more than a few times. He was a Marine, and you're going to correct me and say a Marine, always a Marine.
Right. He wasn't a Marine. He is
He's
a
a Marine today. And he still looks
He
like a
retired
Marine,
from
too.
the Marine Corps, exactly.
Good shape, you know, kind of like my dad was his whole life. I think Marines want to stay in good shape, and they're ready for anything at any time.
Right.
So-
He's got the regulation haircut.
Yeah, he
so
does.
he's
That's
ready.
right, he does. I've never really noticed that. Now, what was his rank when he got out?
He was a major because he
major.
started as enlisted.
Oh, he did?
He did.
Wow, that's
He did.
impressive. That's
and he
impressive.
served quite a few years as enlisted, and then he went through the Marine Corps College degree program.
Wow.
He had dropped out of college to join the Marine Corps, and he went back to his alma mater, Bates College.
Oh, really?
And graduated from there 13 years after he had originally started. But the long story short is he started the Marine Corps as enlisted and then went back, completed his education, and continued as an officer.
That's amazing. My father, who was in the Marines too, we talk
Mm-hmm.
quite often, he was at Guadalcanal and Iwo Jima and made it home from both those battles.
Right.
But he was a master sergeant. And I remember my father saying when he got out, they offered him a commission to stay in. And he said, no, thank you. Even as a second lieutenant after World War II, I need to go home and stay home.
Right,
But
right.
to start out as an enlisted person, like Vic did, and then rise to the rank of major, that's very impressive. Very impressive.
Thank you. Well, and my dad was a World War II Marine also.
Oh, was
As
he?
Yours, oh, yeah, as yours was too. And he was serving in San Diego, and he was supposed to go to Iwo Jima. And as they already put his sea bag on the truck to go out, and they said, Kelly, pull your sea bag. We're going to put you in officer training so you can be in the land forces to invade Japan.
Wow. And that never happened.
And that never happened. So as soon as the war was over, as soon as they dropped the bombs, the war was declared over pretty quickly. And they sent my father and most of the rest of the guys who were with him to universities in the U.S.
Well, you know,
They said,
he was
"Go get
blessed.
go
Because
get your
that
degree."
land invasion of Japan would have been devastating.
Oh, I
as
wouldn't
far-
be here today.
Yeah, probably not. That's right.
My father would not have. They closed the schools in Japan, and about 4 months before we were anticipating the ground invasion, because they knew that the U.S. soldiers and Marines wouldn't kill the children, so they were going to use them as a human shield. So
The Japanese.
The Japanese, sorry, yeah. So
The Japanese of that day.
of that
day.
World War II.
Right.
So, you know, yes, I'm very blessed that my dad didn't have to go out and do that with the ground forces. I wouldn't be here today if he did.
Well, you know, they always talk about the dropping of the bombs. And that was always, and still debated today, whether we should have dropped the atomic bomb on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. But when you look at what President Truman was told was going to happen with a land invasion,
Yes.
it would have devastated, so many Americans would have died. You know, that was the alternative that Truman chose. Whether right or wrong, I think right. I think most Americans think the right decision, but...
Well, and there would have been Japanese casualties in the form of civilians.
Oh, I see, because
Women
of
and
the children and what, yeah.
Because they were planning on using human shields. When they declassified that information a few years ago, all that came out, that there was a massive plan for human shield
Wow.
from the civilians, using the civilians of Japan. And so, yeah, I mean, when you add that into the equation, either way, there was going to be tremendous,
Right.
horrible carnage.
Loss of life on every side.
Yeah.
So, well, let me ask you have some kids?
We do. We have 3 kids. They're all adults now.
Are they?
Yeah.
Out of the house?
Yeah, out of the house, 2 school teachers and a naval officer.
Wow. That goes to show that your family is committed to public service.
Thank you.
I
yeah.
mean, you, your husband, your son's in the Navy? Did you
Our
say?
son's in the Navy. He's a medical student right now, becoming a Navy doctor.
And then 2 daughters that are school teachers.
Yes.
I'm not sure what's more dangerous, being in the military or being a school teacher, but that is true in this day and age. Well, so tell me about Patrice Kelly. As I mentioned earlier, Patrice is an attorney. She headed up one of the most important departments within DOT, the Office of Drug and Alcohol Policy Compliance. Mm-hmm. But let's go back a little bit before that. You graduated from law school. You became an attorney. Where'd you go from there? What path did you choose?
I practiced law in D.C.
Oh, did you?
And I worked for a D.C. law firm that was focused on transportation law. They no
really?
longer exist, but they were Zuckert, Scout, and Rosenberger.
Mm-hmm.
And Mr. Zuckert had been Secretary of the Air Force under President Kennedy.
Oh, wow.
And so we had airlines, we had trucking companies, we had the American Trucking Association as a client, we had Mariner companies too. So I really enjoyed that firm. Then I was lured away from them by a New York-based firm that at the time was the 2nd oldest in the country.
Wow.
It had dated back to the 1700s in New York City, and it was called Lord Day and Lord Barrett Smith. And again, I was in their transportation practice. So
and how did you enter in when you started with that one firm? Who he was the secretary? What did someone walk in one day and hand you a pile of papers and say, "Start finding out everything you can about transportation"? I mean, was that kind of how did that transpire?
that process is somewhat organic. When you go to law school, you get offers from firms, and then you see what their practice areas are, and then you move in from there. And I was very lucky because I went to Georgetown University Law Center, which
Very
was
impressive.
one of the top,
Very
thank you, one of the
impressive.
top 10 in the country. And then, in addition to that, I had the good fortune to work at the Supreme Court of the United States.
right.
A part-time job, very part-time, like literally about 10, 12 hours a week. Yet I still got to go to all the oral arguments, and I really, the Supreme Court's a very small place, and back when I was there, including the police, it was about 350 people there.
Wow.
So we saw the justices on a regular basis, we greeted each other. Justice O'Connor mentored me.
You told me that.
And so, that was pretty cool. And then when it came time to interview with law firms, I was very lucky. They said,
Well,
we
because
like the resume,
Right,
we like
exactly.
Georgetown, we like Supreme Court of the United States. And so I got a lot of offers from different of the major law firms in Washington, D.C. at the time. And I said, the Secret Scout, I kind of like the people, and the practice area sounds interesting. Let me try it out.
Transportation.
And then from there, I started building some relationships with some government people, and they said, you really should think about working in the government. So I started to apply to the Federal Aviation Administration and got in there. And
As an attorney
loved
with
it.
the FAA.
As an attorney, as an enforcement and regulatory attorney. And I did that, oh my goodness, that was 1991. And moved over there and really loved my enforcement practice. And while I was there, it was kind of a fun story. I was in a branch where we were pursuing the enforcement cases. And in the enforcement cases, we had hazardous materials, we had pilot and air traffic deviations. But the drug testing, there was no alcohol testing yet. The drug testing was pretty new. And the other attorney said, I don't want to do this. This is too sciencey. I just am not enjoying it. And I said, well, the air traffic control cases are only so exciting. You get a radar readout, either the guy was above it or the guy was below it. And that's how you took your case. But I said, no, let me try the drug and alcohol stuff. And I fell in love with the drug stuff. And then the alcohol cases came in, and it all just kept coming into me. So I built the early expertise in it. I started to read the Omnibus Transportation Employee Testing Act to get more background. Then I ended up applying for a position in the drug abatement division because I was still young. I was still in my 20s, and I really wanted to try management. So I saw that there was a management position open in drug abatement, went over there, and then they said, oh, good, we've hired our attorney now. So really dig deep in this Omnibus Act because we think there are a lot of problems with it.
And wasn't it just starting out about that time? I mean,
yeah.
Even though there was an act to it, nobody knew really how to implement it. Nobody knew the ins and outs of it and so on.
Well, we had the regs in place.
I see.
But the statute put additional requirements on that we were still trying to figure out, like it was forcing us to follow HHS for the science and the technology, even though we originally started by following them. But then we said, we'll weigh this out as we go down the road. There was no more weighing it out. The marriage was complete. We were stuck with HHS. They were stuck with us. There was also a rather draconian provision in this statute where it said if you are in aviation and you have one failed test, your second failed test will permanently preclude you from ever working in that safety-sensitive position again. And I was told, go back and see if we can find a way around it. Read the legislative history, learn as much as you can about why we have this provision and how we could maybe maneuver around it. Well, there was no maneuvering around it. It was something that was just set in stone. And so in doing that, though, I became more and more familiar with the statute and basically became the go-to person.
And has that remained the same since then?
Yes.
Well, isn't that a little contrary to the approach? I don't want to use the term rehabilitation, but I will use the term rehabilitation, recovery. Isn't that a little different than what we're trying to move to in 2026 of a second chance if people stop using drugs and so on? But still in the FAA regs, that says today that if you have a second one, you're done forever?
Yes, and it's because the Omnibus Act says it.
I see.
So if Congress made a modification to the Omnibus Act to remove that, I think everybody would be a lot happier for it.
And is that the only mode that has that provision?
The only mode. It was originally proposed for all the modes who were in the OTEDA statute, but, and I say it that way because Coast Guard and pipelines are not in that statute. So for the other modes, which are FAA, FMCSA, Federal Transit, and Federal Rails, they're all covered by the statute, and they all originally had a permanent bar. But apparently each of them negotiated out of that, but nobody in FAA negotiated out of it.
That's very interesting. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
It just kind of goes counter to what we're trying to move to in this culture today of trying to let people start over again, get a second chance.
And even back then, the rest of the modes were able to allow anyone to go back. They were allowed to allow anybody to go back as long as the person could demonstrate that they had been successfully rehabilitated and were able to pass a return to duty test with a negative result. But they left it in there. And, I always used to say at FAA, it's because whoever in legislative affairs was dealing with that on the FAA side fell asleep at the switch. They just didn't realize that provision was not there because of them, but they didn't realize they needed to get that removed like the other modes had gotten it removed.
Well, I told you a minute ago, she's the expert's expert. So here you had something that I didn't know. That really is very interesting to me, that's still in there and so on and so on. So maybe one day we'll get it out. Maybe somebody will take another look at it and see, because the other modes don't have it. So you were over at FAA, and you were an attorney over there, and then you went to the Office of Drug Abatement.
Right, exactly.
And you were a manager over there.
Yeah, I was a manager over there, and then when we restructured, we decided we needed a deputy because we were growing. And so we eventually grew to 80 people. But while we were growing, we expanded our branches, we expanded our management structure, and we created a deputy division manager position. So I was the first one to serve in that position.
The deputy director?
As the deputy, yeah, it was the division manager, but yes, essentially a deputy director position. And 11 years is how long I was in there.
You were in that position 11 years. Now, that was still under FAA?
still under FAA.
I see.
And the Office of the Secretary, ODAPC, was trying to get me for a while. They kept saying, come over on a detail, consider coming over. And finally, I did decide to throw my hat in the ring when they had an open job bid. And I came over there, and I was a staff person for 1 year. And then I became the deputy there.
I see. And do you remember what year that was?
Around 2008.
Around 2008. So you went over there as a staff person, you got promoted to deputy director, and then you became the director eventually.
I went over in 07, became the deputy in 08.
Now, a lot of people know, our audience knows, that DOT regulates safety-sensitive positions like airline pilots, train engineers, truck drivers, even the U.S. Coast Guard, although they're not part of DOT, continue to adhere to most of DOT's regulations.
Right.
And we'll come back to that in a second. But there's this office within DOT called ODAPC, the Office of Drug and Alcohol Policy Compliance. And they're the source for DOT to go to within DOT anytime there's any questions. I think the modes reach out to ODAPC on a regular basis, asking questions and guidance. Would that be accurate or not?
A little bit less so now, but
Right.
yes, ODAPC really served the function of bringing the modes together. The drug and alcohol regulations, especially the drug regulations, came out rather quickly. And so the Department of Transportation wanted to standardize them because they were just costing industry too much money. FRA, FTA, motor carriers, aviation, they all had different provisions. And when you can reduce things to the lowest common denominator, it's more economically efficient.
Right.
So ODAPC's role became making a one DOT approach, bringing the modes together, eliminating the redundancies, and just streamlining the process. And in doing that, they did the plain language rewrite of Part 40, which we began around 1998, and we finished in 2000.
And ODAPC reports directly to the secretary, is that correct?
Actually, that is true. And that's very unusual because in the government, we usually have divisions and subdivisions and directorates and all these other things below the level. But because the drug and alcohol work was so high profile, we were directly connected to the secretary. So I served on the secretary's staff.
And you used to meet
My
with the
whole
secretary on a regular basis?
Met with the secretary weekly.
And in your role as director and deputy director over there, you were the author of many of the regulations, I would
Yes.
say. I mean, that was part of your job.
Yes.
And that's why you've become the expert on so many of these regulations, not only because it was part of your job, but you actually wrote it.
I did. Being a lawyer helped. Having the background on the Omnibus Transportation Employee Testing Act of 91 really helped because people said she knows what these provisions are supposed to mean.
Right.
She knows what Congress intended for us to do. And so I was on working groups. I would involve my staff. I would involve others. When we rewrote Part 40, it was an intermodal effort. But nonetheless, yes, I authored a lot of it. And one of my strong suits was writing what we call the preamble. And that's the story of what we're changing and why we're changing it.
Like the preamble to the Constitution or the Bill of Rights. I mean, don't those documents have somewhat of a preamble that tell the story a little bit?
They do, but in a rulemaking, it's even more nitty-gritty.
More extensive.
And you're right. It goes into why exactly did you choose this?
I see. And why you needed it?
Why did you need it? And what did the public commenters say about it? So as a result, I was always the guy who read all the public comments.
Right.
Because that was part of what I felt my function was too. To be connected to the public so that the regulations our office were making were better and so that the regulations were more responsive to the concerns in the real world. And government people hate when you tell them that there's a real world. And they'd say, well, you don't think we're functioning in the real world? And I'd say, no, not at all. And maybe it's because I worked on Wall Street before I went to law school. And maybe it's because I worked in private practice. But no, the government is not the real world.
Right.
And when you're functioning in a stovepipe like that, you don't feel the economic impacts of what you're imposing.
Because you have the government money behind you. I mean,
Exactly.
What you do doesn't affect you. It affects other people, but
That's
doesn't
exactly
affect
it.
you.
That's exactly it. And, I also was very sensitive to the fact that I was a bureaucrat. My colleagues were bureaucrats. We were not elected by the people. And so I thought we had a higher level of duty than even congressional folks. Congressional folks are there to represent the interests of the people. We couldn't even be so bold as to say that. We were really there to serve the people. And so I didn't feel like we could take positions that were completely contrary
To what you're hearing.
to what I'm hearing from reasonable folks.
Right.
I mean, safety's one issue. You're not going to make a decision that says safety doesn't matter. But how to achieve safety in the most economically efficient way was something where I really had my ear to the ground. And again, I felt that as a public servant, I was merely a bureaucrat. I was not an elected leader. And so I needed to hear more from the people who were impacted.
So how long were you at ODAPC?
I was
From
in
the beginning to the
ODAPC
directorship?
from 2007 through, 2025. So 18 years.
And I met Patrice when she would travel the country and speak at annual conferences and industry conferences and various meetings in Washington, D.C. when she was the director. And she was always very knowledgeable. She was always very helpful. But she did represent DOT because that's who you worked for.
Yes.
And I think the industry learned so much when you would travel around and do those round tables around the country. You always came to NDASA, the National Drug and Alcohol Screening Association's conference. You were always one of our keynote speakers. I went to, I think it was Barcelona, Chile this last year, and Patrice was a keynote speaker in Chile. We mentioned in one of the other podcasts, the other countries look to DOT to be the gold standard. And one of those reasons is because of you. You wrote the regulations, you had the knowledge, and she's not only called upon by people like me and people in the United States, but she's called upon, you hear from other countries all the time, want to talk to you about how they could adopt best practices and what does DOT do. So I've seen Patrice in Trinidad, in Barcelona, in Chile, everywhere, talking about the importance of public safety as it relates to drug and alcohol testing.
Well, I didn't make it to all of those. But what happened is sometimes people came to me. So I met with the Nigerians, I met with the Germans, the Chinese, the Australians, the Brits. I met with a lot of people in ODAPC. And they would come and they would sit in our conference room and they would say, hey, listen, marijuana just got legalized. What do I do now? They would say, hey, actually the one who surprised me and thrilled me the most was the Nigerian federal air surgeon.
Wow.
She was a woman who was following Part 40 for the pilots in Nigeria. And she said, I require all pilots to be subject to drug and alcohol testing directly in accordance with 49 CFR Part 40.
Wow.
I love your regulation. It's easy to understand. It's easy for us to train collectors to do this work. And she said, I actually just really wanted to meet you and, talk a little bit about what we do. And I was really surprised and overwhelmed. And I had my team with me, and we, when she left, we thought, wow, this is incredible. The people across the globe said, these regs look pretty good. I can use these. I can make these work. And similarly across the country. States adopted laws in at least 23 cases where they said, we're going to follow the federal requirements, be it DOT or HHS. We're going to require company testing in our state to look like a federal program.
Wow. Well, so as the director of ODAPC, I'm sure you saw many, many changes from the time you became a staffer to the time you retired as director from DOT. Can you give me one, two, how many you'd like to give, differences, if you can recall, of where the world of drug and alcohol testing as it relates to DOT was in 1993, maybe, around then, to where it was in 2025 when you left? I mentioned to you, I thought technology was going to be one of the big things. But I'm sure you saw some other things over the years that weren't there present. I think I told you, we joked about in my first drug testing business, I would fax all of the results. I had three very nice ladies who sat at a desk and fax the results to everybody back in 93 to 95. So technology, and we didn't have a website back then, we didn't have anything. So technology, I'm sure, is one of them. But take a minute, if you would, and tell me if you can recall the biggest changes you saw from the beginning through 2025.
Sure. I mean, certainly technology is definitely one of them, as we mentioned. But when we first started our program, an awful lot of people thought there was no need whatsoever for drug testing, that people in safety-sensitive positions simply wouldn't use. It wouldn't occur to an airline pilot. It wouldn't occur to a locomotive engineer. Yet we had accidents.
And I'm going to stop you there. Tell us about the big accident that you talk about quite a lot that really put things in focus, I would say,
Yes.
and really got us looking at public safety. What was that accident?
One night in early January of 1987, there was an Amtrak train full of people who were traveling over the holidays, many, many college students and families who were going back and forth to see loved ones. And two Conrail train operators thought it was okay to choke it up in the cabin. And they missed multiple signal indicators, and they rammed the train.
And the Amtrak?
The Amtrak train right off the tracks.
Oh, my goodness.
And when you look at the pictures for Chase, Maryland, Amtrak 1987, you'll see the train not even looking like a train. It's just like a zigzag.
Unbelievable.
And one of the people I know from my own neighborhood, one day we were having a discussion, and she said, I didn't realize this is what you do for a living. I was on the train that night.
Oh, my goodness.
And so she said, I really hope you and the people you're working with keep fighting to keep things drug-free. And she said, when you go out and you do these industry conferences, please tell them I'm asking that you continue to do what you're doing, all of you. Because she said, there hasn't been another Chase, Maryland. And I said to her, I don't intend for there to be another one on my watch either. So you have my word. And, but you know, the situation with marijuana does worry me, because as this country has started to legalize it and make it more acceptable, the problem is we're losing sight of what's going on with safety-sensitive employees. And if marijuana moves out of Schedule 1 to Schedule 3, as is proposed right now at this point in time, that would take it out of DOT testing, and we don't want to have another Chase, Maryland.
Yeah. And let me ask you, just jumping back for a minute on changes, since you said at the beginning, and when you say the program, do you really mean the regulation, or when you say, define that,
Sure.
What does that mean?
I mean more than just the regulations. It's the regulations, it's the policy, it's the way people carry out the different parts of what we do. So like I said, people thought this isn't a problem at all. There was not a lot of cheating. The early cheating was they would put in formaldehyde or glutaraldehyde. So a donor would walk into a collection site with a little vial in his or her pocket, and they would pour this stuff into their urine specimen. And the collector wouldn't notice it because it would blend in with the urine, but it would literally gum up the machinery at the lab.
Oh, my goodness.
And it would cost the lab thousands of dollars every time they picked up another specimen with glutaraldehyde or formaldehyde. So they started running pre-tests on those to figure out if the specimens were safe to test.
Wow.
And it was a little crazy from that direction, and that was probably the mid-90s, and we started getting into specimen validity testing in that time, because we said, you know what, they're starting to put stuff in their specimens. And cheating became huge, but in the beginning,
It wasn't that.
it was not that. And the other thing was there were so few collection sites that at least at FAA, we had a pretty good handle on every single collection site that was operating within our realm. And so if we wanted to go out and do collection site inspections, it wasn't a problem. We just pulled up our list. And it became something where, you know, now with technology and social media, what's going on is there are people all over the country who are not qualified to be collectors, who are not properly trained, who are doing these. And good luck when the feds try to find them and track down the information.
Well, that brings me to what I was going to ask about, and that's training and qualifications of collectors. Back when it started, did you have many training programs available?
No.
It was kind of like read something and become a collector, kind of, per se.
Well, or there were a lot of the associations that would, there was a Collectors Association.
I've
Drug
heard
and
that
Alcohol,
story, yeah.
Testing Industry Association was originally the Collectors Association, and they changed their name around 1996 to 97. And they would offer training classes, but they didn't have conferences.
I see.
They just had training.
So they did have training.
Yeah.
There was some structure of training out there.
There was some network of people who were offering training, but it just wasn't anything like the sophistication of today.
And I guess because of the rampant attempt to adulterate and cheat on tests today, the need for good training and becoming qualified as a collector is even more important, because you've got to know what to look for. You've got to know how to properly do the test, even more so than in the beginning when it didn't have a lot out there. There wasn't a lot of cheating and so on. So today, you've got to know what you're doing to be a collector, because it's somewhat of a game. You've got to beat them before they beat you as a collector.
Correct.
So.
Yeah, that's exactly it. And because there were not the products before, and because
To adulterate
or substitute,
right.
those just didn't exist. Like I said, it was just formaldehyde and glutaraldehyde. That was pretty much it. And we've taken now everything to a level where if you have a collector who's not properly trained, they're going to let an awful lot of things slide by. And part of good training involves learning the mistakes others have made, or the experiences others have had, and learning the pitfalls before they actually happen to you. So that's one of the reasons why training is so much more important now, because you're just dealing in a wild world, and there's a lot at stake. I mean, people have their careers at stake. They want to continue using their drugs, and they want to continue their career. And so they're going to do anything in their power to allow them to do both.
Well, I always talk about it that collectors don't really realize, and drug testing providers, that what they're doing has a direct connection to children riding on school buses.
Yes.
And families getting on planes that we all fly on a regular basis.
Right.
A lot of collectors don't really understand the importance of their job.
That's right.
And if they don't do their job right, there might be a school bus driver or someone in the public safety environment that gets high, uses drugs, they don't get caught for whatever reason, and terrible things happen. So it really is a serious thing to be a drug testing specimen collector. And, we're talking about training here, so I have to bring up the fact that we have the Accredited Training Academy that is putting together, and has put together for quite some time, a wide range of training programs and courses for drug testing collectors and DERs, and reasonable suspicion training, DOT oral fluid training. And Patrice serves as a regulatory consultant. And we're going to talk about your new company that you started toward the end, but Patrice serves as our regulatory consultant to Accredited Drug Testing and the Accredited Training Academy. And you actually reviewed the Academy's DOT urine collector program.
I did.
Made comments, modified it, and signed off on it, because you had a lot of things to do with making sure that it was a quality program.
It was a really good quality program before it touched it. It's just a question of I had a lot of things to kind of adjust to make sure that it was the best of the best.
Right. Well, and we thank you for that. And Patrice is always available to answer any questions we have about DOT regulations. So as we go along, and we've heard about ODAPC, and we heard about your public service, your service career. And I always say I want to thank you on behalf of Americans for serving in that role. I have a friend of mine who's I was with the other day, and I was at a meeting, and he retired from the government, and he's held chief of staff positions. He's held a multitude of positions, and someone mentioned casually that he retired. And I said, whoa, whoa, whoa. I said, let's take a minute to stand up and recognize this man that gave 30-some years of his life to serving the public. And that same thing applies to you. With all those positions, FAA as an attorney, as a manager in the abatement office, and then moving up to ODAPC, the public doesn't really understand people like you that have given your entire career to serving us, people like me. So I want to thank you on behalf of myself, but I'm sure many other people out there.
Thank you. No, I appreciate that.
So let's talk now about the number one discussion that everybody's talking about, and that is the rescheduling of marijuana. We know marijuana has been a Schedule I drug since, I believe, the 1970s. Is that correct?
Yeah.
And many administrations, Obama, Biden, President Obama, President Biden, talked about rescheduling marijuana to a Schedule III to make it more easily accessible. And for whatever reason, that never happened. However, in early December, President Trump made the decision to sign an executive order in rescheduling marijuana from a Schedule I to a Schedule III.
Right.
And, you know, I always say it's interesting, and I was talking about this yesterday, government always says follow the science. But they're not following the science in this one, are they?
They're not.
Tell us, now, I also want to emphasize to everyone who's DOT regulated out there, or if you're a drug testing provider and you do a lot of DOT drug testing, nothing has changed. Just because this executive order was signed, it has not become a Schedule III.
No.
There's a lot of steps, and who knows where it's going to end up. There's probably going to be some litigation, which would probably tie it up even longer.
Yeah.
But so nothing has changed. I know people call our office at Accredited Drug Testing, and we've even had safety-sensitive people, and they'll say, can I start smoking marijuana? And the answer is, no, you can't. I did a video back at Christmas, right before Christmas, and I said, for all the truck drivers in America, I hope you get everything for Christmas, but the one thing you're not getting because of this executive order is the ability to start smoking marijuana. But there is this effort by the administration to get it to go from 1 to 3. There is a big question if it goes to 3, as it is, if the U.S. Department of Transportation could keep testing for marijuana. There's some people that believe if we don't have some federal legislation that provides a safety carve-out, as we call it, and I'm going to ask you to talk about that in a minute,
Sure.
that DOT may have problems in testing. So I guess, first of all, tell me, if it does go to 3, what are the ramifications? How long do you think it will be till something happens? Where, in a big picture, where are we on that subject?
Well, I think that there are a lot of factors that we don't know and will not know because the president has many competing priorities. So does the attorney general. And she's got an awful lot on her plate right now. And I know the president is eager to see marijuana rescheduled to Schedule III, but I don't know that he understands the implications. I can't imagine a president of the United States would say, sure, let's let school bus drivers and airline pilots function on a daily basis without any restrictions on marijuana. So,
and I don't think you would either.
There are a lot of, there's a lot at play here. And I think that it's hard to read the tea leaves on timing because of those various competing interests and because I think the National Drug and Alcohol Screening Association
and DASA
has done a lot to make sure that they raise to the attention of this administration that there is more to be considered here. The problem really is rooted in that Omnibus Transportation Employee Testing Act of 1991 that we talked about earlier, where I was the department's lead expert on it. At that time, in 91, Congress inextricably tied DOT to HHS for the science and for the certification of the laboratories. So HHS is restricted by an executive order from President Reagan in 1986.
Good president, I might add.
Good president, who restricted them to Schedule I and Schedule II. If marijuana becomes Schedule III, there's no authority. There just simply is no federal legal authority.
For DOT to test.
For DOT or for HHS.
I see.
Either
or
one.
HHS.
Right. And, you know, you heard about the Chevron doctrine that was overturned a little more than a year ago. What Chevron allowed was, it said to federal agencies, if you think this is within the authority Congress gave you, you can do X, Y, and Z. You can make that regulation. Well, the Supreme Court said, oh, no, no, no. Bureaucrats do not decide what Congress intended. Unless Congress is explicit about it, then you're stuck. Where we're sitting in a situation where Chevron now is gone and rescinded, DOT is definitely limited to Schedule 1 and 2 because HHS is limited. It would be a very far stretch for DOT and HHS to say, okay, well, with moving to Schedule 3, we're going to continue to test. That would be like trying to implement the Chevron doctrine.
All over again.
All over again, and would make them very vulnerable in litigation.
So I guess the first question I have, if it goes to Schedule 3, and we'll take the safety carve out and set it over here for a minute, when do we think that could happen? A year, year and a half? I mean, it's not happening next week.
Well, that's why I say it depends on these competing priorities.
I see.
If the president says to the Attorney General, I want you to drop everything with ICE, with Homeland Security, I want the focus immediately on rescheduling of marijuana to Schedule 3, that is what she's going to do, or we're going to have a new Attorney General. So I think it's a fickle schedule. It's the idea that whatever the priority turns out to be at that given week is going to be the priority. And so if the president switches his priorities to rescheduling of marijuana again, I think it could happen. Yes, it could. Could it happen in another week or two? Yes, it could.
Wow.
Could it happen in 3 years or longer? Yes.
So we just don't know.
We absolutely don't know. And the president was full speed ahead in December with this. And then, we've been told, well, maybe it'll be a couple of weeks. And then, well, maybe it'll be a month or so. And we just don't know. But it would be really ill-advised if this administration makes that leap over to Schedule 3. And like I said, for them to try...
Without taking everything under consideration.
Exactly. Right. And without a safety carve-out, to be honest. There could be a safety carve-out if the president were to issue an executive order giving HHS the authority. HHS can't give itself the authority to test for Schedule 3. And again, this starts to go back to what I was saying with Chevron, that the bureaucrats cannot create their own authorities. And they can't derive them from what they think Congress might have said when Congress said something very specific, which is that DOT will follow HHS. And Congress knew that HHS was limited to Schedule 1 and 2. But, back in 1991, what else were we going to be testing for except Schedule 1 and 2? Those were really the worrisome drugs back in the day.
And when Patrice talks about a safety carve-out, this is something Patrice and myself, Joe McGuire of the National Drug and Alcohol Screening Association, our Governmental Affairs Committee, we've been back and forth to Washington for the last year, trying to bring to the attention of the decision makers there in Congress and the White House that rescheduling could have a negative impact on DOT.
Absolutely.
And we're trying to get Congress to pass legislation that would provide a safety carve-out, as we call it, to ensure the DOT could continue to test for marijuana. We feel like we're on a good path there. We've had a lot of members of Congress interested in doing a safety carve-out, because when you ask a senator or a congressman, do you fly on an airplane? They say yes, and then you tell them the ramifications of not having a safety carve-out, they listen.
They do, and they understand that their constituents' children ride on school buses, if not their own children. And they everyone we talked to says, I didn't realize that was an issue. I just didn't know.
Yeah.
And I really don't think the marijuana industry wants to see a major transportation accident happen right after rescheduling or whatever, because it's going to be a series of congressional hearings.
Right.
And then it's going to be legislation, and then it's going to
pay the piper.
A huge rollback on any gains they've had.
Yeah, and you said it. I don't think President Trump, regardless of what his position is, was advised enough or was provided good, accurate information as it relates to public safety. There were people that wanted this to get done, And if you don't ask the right questions, you don't get the right answers. So in many cases, or in this particular case, I don't think that the discussions regarding transportation, public safety took place.
No.
But they are today. And they really are today because of the National Drug and Alcohol Screening Association that I'm the past chairman of. Patrice is the past senior advisory there. We're both very well involved still to this day. We went to Washington a week ago, met with members of Congress. We're going back up probably in the next couple of weeks to get this safety carve-out done for not only the transportation industry, but for my family and your family and everyone else's family. So we're seeing what happens with medical, or not the medical, but the rescheduling of marijuana. We don't know what's going to happen exactly, but we're going to keep our viewers certainly in the loop, and we're going to let you know what's happening. And if any new news comes out here at Beyond the Test, you're going to be the first to know about it. So what are we doing now? So you retired from the government, and I know you served as a senior policy advisor to Endesa, and then you opened up Patrice Kelly Consulting, and that has taken off.
It has.
You know,
really
people,
has.
transportation industry players, stakeholders, myself at Accredited Drug Testing, I3 Screen, I believe, is a client of yours too. People are coming to your door every day. Because she's the expert's expert on regulations. So tell us a little bit about Patrice Kelly Consulting.
Well, thank you for asking. So first of all, I'm completely thrilled and humbled to be encountering all the things that I am right now. So many people have stepped forward and said, you know, you helped me when you were in the government, and I always valued that you made time. I always valued that you listened. I really like the way you answer questions. And so many people have said they would write to people in the government and not get answers, and they'd write to me, and I would give them the full explanation as well as sources they could cite. And they said, I can't tell you how many times you saved me. And so one after another, even small businesses are coming forward and getting agreements with me because they're saying, I remember what you did for me or what you did for us. And that's a nice position in life to be in, to know that you're working with people who you like and respect. I'm at a point in my career now, I don't have to work with people I don't like. You know, and isn't that a great thing? Wouldn't we all love that?
I'm working toward that goal. I'm not there yet, but I'm working toward that goal.
I want to work with people I like. But I'm able to do that because I can just say, no, you know, that's actually not something really I'm interested in. But the people who I'm working with, I have a lot of respect for. And so it's also a pleasure when I get an email or a call to say, oh, good. Look at who's in touch. Not, oh my gosh, I can't believe they're writing to me again. It's just really an exciting time. I'm advising on regulatory matters. I'm advising on the Federal Aviation Administration's International Repair Station Rule. I'm advising folks on the safety carve-out. We're talking about various aspects of intermodal transportation. Some people call me for business advice. And so it's really been a nice spread. I have a website, and thank you very much.
Tell us the website.
Accredited Drug Testing helped me so much in setting up this website. It's www.patricekellyconsulting.com. .com.
Okay, all right.
And on my website, I have an outline of all the services that we provide. I have kind of a description of my background. I do everything from expert witness testimony through, just as I said, basic advising, DOT, non-DOT. It's kind of a wide network. And my staff in ODAPC used to say, you need to take all the lawyer calls because we don't speak lawyer. And it's kind of that way now, too. As attorneys in this field want additional answers and need additional help, they end up signing on with me as clients.
Well, I would think the expert witness testimony would be big. Or even if you don't get to the testimony, the consulting as an expert witness of you're doing something right, you're doing something wrong, and here's how to fix it. And I have to tell you, Patrice, one of the reasons she's down here in Florida is my company, Accredited Drug Testing. We have an annual strategic planning session with all of our staff. And Patrice spoke as our regulatory consultant today. It's one of the best presentations I've ever heard. The staff was very interested in making notes, taking notes, asking questions about DOT regulations.
They were great.
We had a great time. We had a great time.
I mean, talk about the experts' experts. You showed me a staff with such expertise and such enthusiasm and sincerity about the field in which they're working. That was just a thrill to be with them.
Well, I appreciate that. And I feel training of staff is crucial to being a successful business. It all falls in place after that. But let me just say this to you, because I believe this sincerely, that if you are a drug testing provider, if you're a lab, if you're anyone who touches and has a stake in the drug testing industry and you need some regulatory consulting, you need to talk about DOT regulations, you need to develop a strategic plan as it relates to DOT regulations, this is the woman to call right here. And she told you how to get a hold of her, but tell us one more time.
It's www.patricekellyconsulting.com. And on there you'll see a contact me button. But rather than giving you my phone number, although my phone number is kind of cute, let me do that.
Yeah, do the phone number.
It's 571-PMK-0622. That's 571-765-0622.
That's perfect. So if you need any advice, any consulting regarding DOT regulations, Patrice is the person to call. Well, Patrice, we're coming to the end of our podcast, and it's really been great to have you on here today. Thank you. It's really been an honor and a privilege to have someone of your caliber, someone of your expertise, someone that's held the positions that you've held in the federal government as it relates to drug and alcohol testing. So I want to tell you, thanks for being here today.
It was my pleasure.
Now, as we get to the end of the podcast, everyone knows that I am an Elvis fan. And everyone knows that I am a Star Trek fan, and I want to be clear, always clear, the original Star Trek. Not any of those shows that came after the original ones. Matter of fact, the one with Captain Kirk, if you notice back here. But I always ask our guests two questions. And every guest has a little bit of knowledge, and some guests have different knowledge. But can you tell me, well, first let me ask you this. Do you remember Elvis Presley's wife's name?
Priscilla.
There you go, Priscilla.
Yeah.
Now, everyone knows that, don't they? I mean, who doesn't know that? I've had a few younger people on the podcast, and they don't know much about Elvis, so they won't be back. Let me assure you of that. But Priscilla's absolutely right. Can you name an Elvis song?
Love Me Tender.
Love Me Tender. My mother used to love that song, Love Me Tender. That was one of his early songs. I think it was late 50s, if I'm not mistaken, 57, 58. Now, here we come down to the Star Trek question.
Okay.
Can you tell me the name of the chief engineer of the Enterprise?
Oh, was that Scotty or?
You gave it. Scotty. That was it. It was Scotty.
Okay.
It was Scotty. I tell you, we're going to have this woman back more and more on this podcast. But it was Commander Scott. That's exactly right. It's Scotty. Well, listen, thank you for being here today. It was a lot of fun. We learned a lot about DOT regulations. We got to learn more about Patrice Kelly and her family. And as I mentioned earlier, if you need any information about DOT regulations or you need any consultation, call Patrice. So we're going to end this podcast today. I want to thank you for joining us at Beyond the Test once again. We're going to have another great guest next month. But more importantly, please remember, Beyond the Test is about entertainment, life, and drug testing. And we'll see you next time.
Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.